I always knew I was the responsible one. That's what happens when you're the older sister, you become the standard bearer, the example, the one who gets blamed when things go wrong. My name is Sheila, and for as long as I can remember, my parents made it clear that I had to be the mature one while my younger sister Barbara got away with everything. Barbara was 3 years younger than me, and from the moment she could talk, she became my parents' golden child. We could do the exact same thing wrong, but somehow, I'd be the only one punished. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. When we were teenagers, I remember a specific incident when we both snuck out to a party. I was 16, Barbara was 13. We both got caught coming home at 1 a.m., but guess who got grounded for a month? Just me. Barbara got a talking to about making better choices. I threw myself into my studies after that. If I was going to be held to a higher standard, I might as well excel. I graduated high school with honors and got accepted to a good college with a partial scholarship. Barbara, meanwhile, barely passed her classes and spent most of her time with a rotating cast of boyfriends my parents pretended not to notice. By my 3rd year of college, I was juggling classes, a part-time job, and regular visits to my great-aunt Mildred. She was my dad's aunt, a spirited old lady who lived alone about 20 minutes from campus. Unlike my parents, Aunt Mildred seemed to actually appreciate my responsible nature. "You're the only one who visits regularly," she'd say, patting my hand while I helped her with groceries or cleaned her bathroom. "Your sister never comes, and your parents only visit on holidays. I like spending time with you," I'd tell her honestly. Aunt Mildred never compared me to Barbara or made me feel like I wasn't doing enough. Meanwhile, Barbara had dropped out of high school, gotten her GED, and announced she had no interest in college. My parents were concerned but ultimately shrugged it off as Barbara finding her path. When Barbara turned 18, she disappeared one night with a guy she'd known for all of 2 months. Some dude named Rick with a motorcycle and questionable employment. My parents were frantic. For weeks, my parents called hospitals and police stations. They hired a private investigator, they cried constantly. Then, about 3 months later, Barbara just strolled back home like nothing had happened. Rick turned out to be a jerk, she explained casually over dinner, according to my mom. So I dumped him and came home. That was it, no punishment, no serious conversation about the worry she'd caused. My parents were just so relieved she was back that they welcomed her with open arms. During my final year of college, I received shocking news. Aunt Mildred had passed away in her sleep, and she'd left me $150,000 in her will. "She left it all to you?" my mom asked, sounding surprised when I called to tell her. "I guess so," I said, still in shock myself. "The lawyer said she updated her will last year." "Well, you were always her favorite," Mom replied with a hint of disapproval, as if I'd somehow manipulated an old woman into leaving me money. The truth was simpler, I was the only one who cared enough to visit her regularly, to help her with her house, to listen to her stories. The inheritance wasn't about favoritism, it was about connection. Barbara, now living at home and working occasional shifts at a local diner, wasn't pleased. "That's so unfair," she complained when I visited home after graduation. "You get a college degree and a bunch of money? What about me? What about you?" I snapped, years of resentment bubbling up. "You've had every opportunity I've had. You chose not to take them." My parents quickly intervened. "Girls, please," Dad said, "Sheila, don't be harsh with your sister. She's trying to figure things out." At 22, with a business degree and $150,000 in the bank, I made a decision. I was going to bet on myself. I'd been developing a business plan for months, a specialized consulting firm that would help small businesses optimize their operations. With Aunt Mildred's money, I could make it happen. My parents thought I was crazy. "That money could be a down payment on a house," Mom argued, "or saved for your future. Starting a business is risky." "I've done my research," I told them firmly, "I believe in this plan." They exchanged that look they always did when they thought I was being difficult. But for once, they couldn't stop me. The first year was brutal. 18-hour days, constantly hustling for clients, learning through trial and error. But slowly, my little company began to grow. I hired my first employee at the 1-year mark. By year 3, I had a small team and a real office. Barbara cycled through jobs during this time, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. She'd occasionally ask me for money, which I'd give her against my better judgment. My parents still made excuses for her, saying she was finding herself. I was 27 and running a successful company when I met Stephen. He worked for one of my client companies, handling their IT infrastructure. We kept running into each other during project meetings, and eventually, he asked me out for coffee. "I've been trying to work up the courage to ask you out for weeks," he admitted over lattes. "Really? I thought you were just really enthusiastic about network security," I joked. He was smart, hardworking, and kind. After years of focusing solely on my business, it felt good to have someone who understood my drive but also encouraged me to occasionally take a night off. We dated for 2 years before he proposed during a weekend trip to the coast. We decided on a small wedding with just close family and friends. I'd never been the type to dream of a huge celebration, and Stephen respected that. We rented a charming venue by the lake and kept the guest list under 50 people. 2 weeks before the wedding, I called my parents to confirm final details. "Mom, I just wanted to check if Barbara has RSVP'd yet. The caterer needs final numbers." There was a pause on the line. "Oh, honey. Barbara won't be able to make it. She's involved with someone new. They're going through some intense things right now." I didn't press for details. Part of me was actually glad Barbara wouldn't be there. Our interactions had been strained for years, and I didn't want any drama on my wedding day. The last thing I needed was Barbara showing up with some sketchy boyfriend or making the day about her somehow. The wedding was perfect. Stephen looked handsome in his suit, and for once, I felt like the center of positive attention. My parents seemed genuinely happy for me, though Mom did mention several times how much Barbara would have loved the cake. After a brief honeymoon in Maui, Stephen and I returned to real life. That's when he approached me with an idea. "I've been thinking about making a change," he said one evening as we unpacked our suitcases. "My company is going through restructuring, and I'm not sure where I'll end up." "That's concerning," I replied, folding a sundress. "What if I came to work for you?" Stephen suggested. "You've mentioned needing someone to oversee IT and operations." "That's literally what I do." I hesitated. Mixing business and marriage seemed risky. But Stephen was qualified, and I did trust his expertise. After thinking it over for a few days and discussing the boundaries we'd need to establish, I agreed. Stephen joined my company as operations director, essentially becoming my second in command when I was traveling. For over a year, things ran smoothly. The business continued to grow, and Stephen proved himself capable at managing things when I was away meeting with clients. We developed a good rhythm, balancing our work relationship and our marriage. Then came the phone call that would begin to unravel everything. I was preparing for bed after finalizing details for an important client meeting the next day when my phone rang. Seeing it was my mother, I almost let it go to voicemail but decided to answer. "Sheila, I need to talk to you about Barbara," Mom said, her voice tense. "She's back home. That relationship she was in, it went bad. She needs help, she needs a job, a stable environment. Something to help her get back on her feet." And there it was. "Mom, I don't think." "She's your sister," Mom interrupted, her voice breaking. "Family helps family. You have a successful business. Surely there's something she could do there." "Mom, Barbara has never held a job for more than a few months. I can't risk." "Just meet with her, talk to her, she's changed, I promise." I refused initially, but my mother kept calling. She cried. She reminded me of my childhood promise to always look out for my little sister. She mentioned how proud Aunt Mildred would be if I helped Barbara. Even Stephen got involved. "Maybe you should give her a chance," he suggested one night after I'd vented about my mother's persistence. "Family is important, and everyone deserves a second chance." I was surprised by his support for the idea. You don't know Barbara like I do. People can change, he insisted, and if it doesn't work out, you can always let her go. After weeks of pressure from all sides, I finally agreed to meet with Barbara. She came to my office dressed more professionally than I'd ever seen her, hair neatly styled, minimal makeup. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, sitting across from me with perfect posture. "I know you have every reason to doubt me." She proceeded to tell me how her life had spiraled out of control, how the relationship she'd been in had become toxic, and how she'd finally found the strength to leave. She even slid a certificate across my desk. "I completed a year-long business administration program," she explained. "I wanted to prove I was serious about making changes." Against my better judgment, I agreed to a 3-month probationary period. I assigned her to Stephen's department, figuring he could keep an eye on her and report back to me honestly. To my surprise, Barbara actually showed up on time and did her work. The first few weeks, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to start showing up late, making excuses, or causing problems. But reports from Stephen were consistently positive. "She's actually quite good with client communications," he told me one evening. "She has a natural charm that puts people at ease." I couldn't help feeling suspicious. This wasn't the Barbara I knew, but as weeks turned into months, I began to wonder if maybe she really had changed. Maybe hitting rock bottom had finally forced her to grow up. My travel schedule intensified during this period. We were expanding into new markets, and I needed to personally meet with important potential clients. I was away from the office for days, sometimes weeks at a time, leaving Stephen in charge of daily operations. 4 months into Barbara's employment, I returned from a particularly grueling 2-week trip to find something odd. Frank, our head of security who had been with the company almost since the beginning, was acting strangely around me. He would start to say something, then stop himself. He avoided eye contact in meetings. When I passed him in the hallway, he looked almost pitying. Frank was in his 60s, a retired police officer who had always been straightforward with me. This behavior was completely out of character. After a few days of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked him to come to my office at the end of the day. As he sat across from me, looking uncomfortable, I got straight to the point. "Frank, something's bothering you, whatever it is, I need to know." Frank shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Miss Sheila, there's something you should know about the security footage." I felt my stomach tighten. "Show me." He handed me his tablet. "This is from last Tuesday when you were in Chicago." The screen showed Stephen and Barbara in the hallway, laughing, then kissing passionately before disappearing into the storage room. My hands trembled as Frank swiped to show more videos, different days, different locations in the office. My husband and sister, caught in various states of intimacy. "How long?" I managed to ask. "At least 3 months," Frank replied quietly. "I'm sorry." I sat alone in my office afterward, replaying everything in my mind. All those business trips I took, all those glowing reports about Barbara, all Stephen's late nights at the office. When I got home, Stephen was cooking dinner as if everything was normal. Without a word, I showed him one of the videos on my phone. His face went pale. "Sheila, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you've been sleeping with my sister in my company." "It was a mistake," he stammered. "It didn't mean anything." "I have dozens of videos, Stephen, dozens." "Sheila, please." "Out," I screamed. "Pack your things and get out." "You're fired, by the way, both of you." While he packed, I prepared termination paperwork for him and Barbara and instructed HR to revoke their access immediately. The next evening, my parents called repeatedly. I finally answered. "Sheila, what's going on?" Mom demanded. "Stephen's at our house, and Barbara won't stop crying. We need you to come over and fix this." Something in her tone sounded off. "Did you know about them?" The slight pause before she answered told me everything. At my parents' house, they were all waiting: Mom, Dad, Barbara, and Stephen. I connected my phone to the TV and played one of the videos. Mom gasped. Dad looked away. Barbara cried harder. How could you all betray me like this? I asked. To my shock, my mother recovered quickly. Sheila, nobody meant to hurt you. These things happen, people fall in love unexpectedly. Barbara nodded, squeezing Stephen's hand. We've been in love for months. I'm pregnant, Sheila. The room spun around me. Pregnant? Almost 4 weeks, she said, placing a hand on her stomach. We were going to tell you next week. That doesn't excuse what you did, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Stephen leaned forward. You can't just fire us without cause, that's illegal. Sexual misconduct in the workplace isn't cause? My father stepped in. You're overreacting. Nobody should lose their livelihood over this. We'll sue you for wrongful termination, Stephen threatened. You'll have to pay us both substantial severance packages. Barbara wiped her tears, suddenly looking calculated rather than devastated. I'm under tremendous stress because of you. My doctor says the baby could be at risk. I have medical documentation. I laughed in disbelief. Medical documentation? You're planning this? We're getting married as soon as your divorce is finalized, Barbara announced. And you'll pay for everything you've done to us. Firing a pregnant woman? The court will destroy you. Mom nodded emphatically. Barbara needs stability now. You need to reinstate them both immediately. Or what? I challenged. Or we'll file a lawsuit first thing tomorrow, Stephen said coldly. Wrongful termination, emotional distress, endangerment of an unborn child. How do you think your clients will react to those headlines? Dad sighed dramatically. We don't want it to come to that, Sheila. But you've left us no choice. Us? I repeated, so you're all in this together? We're family, Mom said firmly, except you're acting like we're not yours anymore. And what about my husband sleeping with my sister? Is that how family acts? Barbara pointed her finger at me. You were never there for him. Always working, always traveling. What did you expect? I looked at these people I'd known my entire life and saw complete strangers. Without another word, I walked out. The next morning, I called James Patterson, a lawyer who specialized in complex divorces. His firm had a reputation for handling high-profile cases discreetly and effectively. I need your help, I told him after explaining the situation. My husband and sister are threatening to sue me. Are you sure that's the only issue? He asked carefully. People who betray in personal matters often betray in professional ones too. Have you checked your company finances? That question stopped me cold. I hadn't even considered that possibility. I think we should start there, James suggested. Before they file anything against you, let's see what we might find to file against them. James Patterson moved quickly. By the end of the week, he had a team of independent auditors examining my company's financial records. It didn't take them long to find irregularities. Stephen had been siphoning money from the company for months, transferring funds to his personal accounts, Barbara's accounts, and even my parents' accounts. He'd disguised the transactions as vendor payments, travel reimbursements, and consulting fees. Barbara had her own scheme running. She'd been submitting fraudulent expense reports, claiming business trips she never took and office supplies never purchased. The receipts showed she'd bought designer clothes, jewelry, and spa treatments instead. Most shocking of all was seeing my parents' names on the list of beneficiaries. They had received consulting fees despite never working for my company. They were all in on it, I said, staring at the documents, my entire family. James nodded grimly. This changes our strategy. We're not just looking at a divorce case anymore. This is fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Before we could file our case, Stephen, Barbara, and my parents made good on their threats. They filed lawsuits against me claiming wrongful termination, emotional distress, and discrimination against a pregnant woman. Stephen also demanded substantial alimony in the divorce proceedings, claiming he'd been instrumental in my company's success. The next few months were a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and court appearances. The financial drain was substantial, legal fees mounted as both sides dug in. My parents had to take out loans to cover their attorney costs after their accounts were frozen pending investigation. Barbara played her role perfectly during the proceedings. She'd show up to court looking pale and fragile, one hand protectively over her growing belly. She'd whisper dramatically to her lawyer whenever I took the stand, as if my very presence was causing her distress. "Ms. Roberts," her attorney addressed me during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you fired your sister out of jealousy rather than any legitimate business reason?" "No," I replied calmly, "I fired her for engaging in inappropriate sexual conduct in the workplace and for financial misconduct, which we've documented extensively." Barbara burst into tears. "She's trying to make me lose my baby. The stress she's causing could make me miscarry." The judge called for order, but the theatrics continued throughout the trial. My lawyer was methodical and relentless. He presented the financial evidence chronologically, showing how the scheme had evolved over time. He brought in cybersecurity experts who testified about the surveillance footage, confirming it hadn't been altered. He even found a paper trail showing Barbara had forged her educational credentials. The certificate she'd shown me was completely fake. The most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. James had hired private investigators who discovered Barbara had a history of similar cons. 3 men in another state had filed police reports against her for credit card fraud before mysteriously withdrawing their complaints. Further digging revealed my parents had paid these men off to protect Barbara. "Your Honor," James argued, "this isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern of behavior supported and enabled by the plaintiffs. Ms. Roberts isn't the villain here, she's the victim." As the evidence mounted, Stephen's lawyer approached us about a settlement. They'd drop all claims if I'd agree to a generous severance package and alimony arrangement. I refused. The trial concluded after a few grueling months. The judge's ruling was decisive. All funds transferred from my company were to be returned. Stephen was sentenced to 3 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. The divorce was granted with no alimony awarded. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to demand jail time for my pregnant sister. I asked the court for leniency, and Barbara received a suspended sentence with probation. My parents escaped criminal charges. There wasn't enough evidence to prove they knew the money they received was stolen. They claimed Stephen had told them it was a bonus structure for family members. I didn't push the issue. They had lost everything already, their savings depleted by legal fees, their reputation destroyed, their home mortgaged to cover their debts. The aftermath was strangely quiet. I returned to my company, explained the situation to my employees, and worked to rebuild trust with clients who had been unsettled by the publicity. I sold the house I'd shared with Stephen and bought a condo closer to my office. I cut off all contact with my family. I blocked their numbers, returned mail unopened, and instructed my assistant to screen all calls and visitors. Eventually, they stopped trying to reach me. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard updates. Barbara had given birth to a healthy baby boy. She'd married Stephen in a small ceremony in the prison visiting room. She was living with my parents, waiting for Stephen's release. They were all struggling financially, my parents working multiple jobs to make ends meet, Barbara picking up occasional work when she could find someone to watch the baby. Sometimes at night, I'd wonder if I should feel guilty about their circumstances. But then I'd remember the look on my mother's face when she defended their betrayal, or Barbara's calculated tears in the courtroom, or my father's dismissal of my pain, or Stephen's complete lack of remorse. Whatever hardships they were facing, they had earned them. I poured myself into work, expanding the business into new markets and doubling our client base within a year. I donated Stephen's clothes and our wedding photos to charity. I joined a trauma support group where I could talk about my experience with people who wouldn't judge or minimize what I'd been through. Dating felt impossible, though many well-meaning friends tried to set me up. The betrayal had left me wary, distrustful. "I'm focusing on my career right now," became my standard response to any inquiry about my love life. In truth, I was focusing on healing. On rebuilding my sense of self after discovering that the people I should have been able to trust the most were capable of such calculated betrayal. Sometimes I wonder what Aunt Mildred would think about everything that happened. She'd always seen through Barbara's act, had always believed in me when my parents didn't. Her inheritance had given me the means to build something for myself, something no one could take away. Trust your instincts, she used to tell me, they'll rarely steer you wrong. I should have listened to mine when it came to Barbara. I won't make that mistake again. My company continues to thrive. I've found friendship and purpose in my work and in the new community I've built for myself. The future stretches before me, uncertain but full of possibility. One thing I know for certain, whatever comes next will be on my terms, not anyone else's.